She fainted from exhaustion until the mafia boss found a milk receipt and realized the truth. The clinking of heavy silverware on porcelain was the baseline rhythm of Matteo De Luca's world. That, and the low, satisfied murmur of Northport's elite, the scent of garlic simmering in olive oil, and the deep, woody aroma of $100 bottles of Barolo being uncorked. Luciano's was his fortress, a temple of dark wood, white linen and brick oven warmth, insulated from the gritty New Jersey streets just outside the heavy, etched glass doors. It was a Tuesday, just past 9 o'clock, and the dinner rush had softened to a comfortable hum. Matteo stood at his usual vantage point, a shadowed alcove near the bar, watching the room. His suit, a custom-tailored midnight blue, fit him like armor. He was a large man, not with the softness of indulgence, but with the dense, coiled power of a predator at rest. His presence was a gravitational pull. The staff orbited him with practiced efficiency, and the patrons, even those who didn't know his name, sat up a little straighter when he passed. He ran his thumb over the face of his grandfather's watch, a silent, grounding habit. Everything was as it should be, until it wasn't. It wasn't a crash or a scream that broke the spell. It was a soft, sudden thud against the front door, followed by a sharp, indrawn breath from Sophia, his hostess. Matteo's head snapped up. Sophia was staring at the glass, her hand half raised to her mouth. "What?" Matteo's voice was low, a rumble that cut through the nearest conversations. He was moving before she answered, crossing the dining room in 3 long, silent strides. The patrons watched him, their curiosity piqued. As he reached the front, he saw what she had seen, a shape crumpled on the welcome mat outside. It looked less like a person and more like a pile of discarded laundry, barely visible under the dim gaslight sconces. "Boss, I think she fainted," Sophia whispered, her eyes wide. A busboy, young and eager, moved to open the door. Matteo put a hand on his chest, stopping him. "Wait." He studied the form. A woman, thin, unmoving. It could be a scam. This was Northport, after all. A faked injury, a lawsuit, a desperate addict. He'd seen it all, but this felt different. There was a stillness to her that was too absolute. "Marco," he called, not raising his voice. A moment later, his head waiter was at his side. "Bring her in. Back booth, now." Marco and the busboy swung the heavy door open, the sudden rush of cold, damp air carrying the scent of the street, wet pavement and exhaust. They gathered the woman up. She was shockingly light, her limbs dangling with a ragdoll limp. As they lifted her, her head lolled back, revealing a face pale as bone, her mouth slightly open. They carried her past the gawking diners to the most secluded booth in the back, the one usually reserved for him or for special guests. Matteo followed, a dark shadow trailing their urgent, awkward movements. "Get her water. And some bread." Matteo ordered the room at large. By the time they settled her onto the plush leather, she was stirring. Her eyelids, thin and almost translucent, fluttered. Then they opened. Her eyes were the first thing he truly registered. They were a soft, indeterminate color, lost in the shadows, but they were vast, and they were filled with a pure, undiluted terror that struck Matteo with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't a scammer. He knew that instantly, with the same certainty that he knew the weight of his own gun. This was the terror of a rabbit in a snare. The woman shot upright, or tried to. She was a tangle of bones and a thin, worn-out coat. She scrambled against the leather, her breath hitching in panicked little gasps. "No, I'm fine. I'm sorry. Her voice was a dry, reedy whisper, barely audible. She tried to slide out of the booth, but her legs wouldn't hold her. She trembled violently, a leaf caught in a gale. "You are not fine," Matteo stated. It was not a question or an expression of concern. It was a fact. "Sit." The word, spoken with the quiet authority that could silence a room or end a life, made her freeze. She stared at him, her chest heaving. He got a good look at her now. She was young, maybe mid-20s, but life had scraped her clean, leaving behind the raw, essential parts, Her cheeks were hollowed out, her skin stretched tight over a delicate bone structure. Her hair, a nondescript brown, was lank and damp. Her clothes, a thin sweater, worn jeans, and sneakers with holes in the soles, were clean but hopelessly old, unfit for the encroaching autumn chill. A waiter set down a glass of water and a basket of warm focaccia. The smell of rosemary and olive oil filled the small space. The woman flinched, as if expecting a blow. "Eat," Matteo said. She shook her head, her eyes darting between him and the door, a clear flight risk. "I can't. I don't have any money. I'm so sorry. I just felt dizzy. It is not a bill. It is bread. Eat." He pushed the basket and the water toward her. She stared at the food. Her body was telling one story, her pride another. He watched the war play out in the tense line of her jaw, the way her hand hovered over the basket and then snatched back, her fist clenching in her lap. "I don't—" "Fine," Matteo said. His patience, always a shallow reservoir, beginning to drain. He signaled Marco. "Bring a small bowl of pasta, the ziti." "Boss, You will sit. You will eat what is given to you, and then you will leave." He leaned forward, his forearms resting on the polished dark wood of the table. He was close enough now to smell her. She smelled of soap and rain and a faint, sharp scent he couldn't place. Fear. "I am used to liars in this restaurant. I am used to people who want something. Their eyes are greedy. Your eyes are just scared. Now, eat the bread before the pasta comes." Her resolve shattered. He saw the exact moment it happened. Her shoulders slumped, and a dry sob, completely silent, racked her body. Her hand, shaking so badly she could barely control it, reached for a piece of bread. She lifted it to her mouth and bit into it, her eyes closing. She chewed slowly as if the texture was a shock, and then her body betrayed her. She tore at the bread, stuffing it into her mouth, followed by a long, desperate gulp of water. She choked, coughed, and then drank again. By the time Marco arrived with a small, steaming bowl of simple tomato-fed ziti, she had devoured half the basket. She looked at the pasta as if it were a miracle. "I thank you," she whispered. And this time, she picked up the fork. Matteo sat back, watching her eat. She ate with a desperate, heartbreaking urgency, her eyes fixed on the bowl as if afraid it would be snatched away. She was starving, not missed lunch hungry, but a deep, structural starvation that had clearly been going on for weeks, maybe months. "What is your name?" he asked. She flinched, her fork clattering against the ceramic. She had to swallow before she could speak. "Ellie?" she said. The lie was as thin as her coat, as pale as her skin. He let it pass. "Ellie, do you have a phone? Someone I can call?" She shook her head, not looking at him. "No phone. An ID. A purse." "No, She clutched a faded, reusable grocery bag that had been on her lap, pulling it close. He hadn't even noticed it before. It was a flimsy green thing, stained and worn at the seams, but she held it like it was her last and only possession, her knuckles white. "I just have this." She finished the pasta, scraping the bowl clean. The small amount of food and warmth had brought a faint flush to her cheeks, but the terror was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. "I have to go," she said, sliding to the edge of the seat. She was already planning her escape. "Is someone waiting for you? Ellie?" No one." She stood, unsteadily, still clutching the bag. "Thank you. For the food. I'm sorry for fainting." She didn't wait for him to reply. She bolted. She moved with a disjointed, panicked energy, pushing past Sophia at the front, and then she was gone, swallowed by the night. The restaurant seemed to exhale. The murmuring resumed. Sophia walked back to the booth, her expression a mix of pity and confusion. "Boss, is she okay?" "She's gone." "Clear the table," Matteo said, his voice flat. He turned to go back to his alcove, the incident already compartmentalized, a strange ripple in a smooth pond. But as he turned, he saw it. On the leather seat, forgotten in her haste, was the green reusable bag. He stopped, and he looked at the door, then back at the bag. He should have let it go, and he should have had Sophia throw it in the trash. It was not his problem. He picked it up. It was practically weightless, just as he'd thought. Whatever she valued so highly, it wasn't heavy. His curiosity, that cold, sharp-edged tool, got the better of him. He looked inside. It was empty. No, not quite. His large fingers brushed the bottom, feeling a small, crumpled piece of paper. He pulled it out and unfolded it under the dim light of the booth. It was a receipt. From the Market Mart, a budget grocery store 12 blocks away, in the bad part of town. The date on it was from 2 days ago, October 23rd. He scanned the items. There was only one. 1 gallon whole milk. Price, $4.19. Total, $4.19. Paid cash. Mateo stood perfectly still, the flimsy piece of paper resting in his palm. He looked at the receipt, and in his mind, he saw her. The sunken cheeks, the hollow eyes, the way she ate that pasta, like a wolf. The lie. No one? A woman who was starving to death had spent her last $4 on a gallon of milk. A cold, unsettling feeling coiled in his gut. This was not a grift. This was not a simple case of poverty. This was something else. A secret. A desperation so profound it made the hair on his arms stand up. He was a man who dealt in brutal, simple truths: money, power, loyalty, and violence. This small, crumpled receipt did not fit into any of those categories. It was a puzzle that made no sense. "Alexei," he said, and his driver, who had been standing, unseen, near the bar, materialized at his elbow. Alexei was a man of few words and absolute loyalty. Mateo did not hand him the receipt. He folded it carefully and slipped it into his own pocket. He handed Alexei the green bag. "The woman who just ran out of here, the one who fainted." "I saw her, boss." Alexei's voice was a low gravel, an echo of the old country. "Find her. Tonight? Be quiet about it. No sirens, no attention, just find her." Alexei nodded, taking the bag. "And when I do?" Mateo thought of the receipt in his pocket. "Just find her. Report to me." Alexei vanished. Mateo turned and walked, not to the bar, but up the back stairs to his office. The sanctuary above the sanctuary. The restaurant felt too loud, the smells too rich. He needed quiet. He needed to think. 12 blocks away. The cold air was a slap that sobered Olivia Carter. The food, warm and heavy in her belly, was a strange, agonizing comfort. It made her aware of just how hungry she had been. It also made her feel sick with guilt. She ran, her thin sneakers splashing through puddles, her lungs burning. Every shadow was a monster. Every approaching set of headlights was him. She clutched her coat closed, her hand instinctively reaching for the bag, for the one thing she'd been carrying all day. Her hand met empty air. Her heart stopped. She stumbled to a halt under a flickering streetlight, her breath fogging in front of her. No. The bag, the green bag. She'd left it. She'd left it at the restaurant, in the booth, with that man. She whimpered, a small, terrified sound. There was nothing in it, nothing but the receipt. But it was hers. It was the only thing she had. The thought of going back was impossible. The thought of that man, with his dark, quiet eyes that saw everything, was more terrifying than the hunger had been. She had to go back. She forced her legs to move, abandoning the bag and the small, strange kindness it represented. She ran the remaining blocks to the tenement building that smelled of boiled cabbage and despair. She took the stairs 3 at a time, her key already in her shaking hand, fumbling with the flimsy lock on apartment 3B. The door creaked open. The room was dark, cold, and blessedly not empty. "Mommy?" A small voice, high and sleepy, cut through her panic. A little boy, no more than 4 years old, was sitting up on a mattress laid directly on the cracked linoleum floor. Olivia's relief was so profound it almost buckled her knees. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." She locked the door, sliding the cheap chain into place, and rushed to him, gathering his small, warm body into her arms. He burrowed against her, his messy blonde hair tickling her chin. "You were gone a long time," he murmured into her coat. "I know, Danny, I know. I'm sorry. I was looking for work." The lie tasted like ash, but it was one of many she told every day. "Are you cold, Mommy?" "I'm okay now." She held him tight, rocking him, trying to stop her own shaking. She was freezing, but she couldn't tell him that. She let him go and went to the tiny, buzzing refrigerator tucked in the corner. She opened it. The light inside had burned out months ago. She reached in and pulled out the gallon jug of milk. It was less than a quarter full. She poured the last of it into his favorite plastic cup, the one with a cartoon rocket ship, now faded from 100 washings. She turned to the sink and added a splash of tap water, stretching the milk, making it last one more night. Her stomach, full of rich pasta, gurgled in protest. Guilt washed over her, hot and acidic. She'd eaten a king's meal while her son waited in the dark. "Here you go, spaceman," she said, forcing a brightness into her voice that felt like a betrayal. "Rocket fuel." He took the cup, his small hands wrapping around it. "I'm not that hungry. Just a little. Danny, you need to keep your strength up for our adventure." He drank, his eyes on her. He was a quiet, watchful child. He saw too much. She sat on the edge of the mattress, pulling the thin, worn blanket up over his legs. "Tell me the story," he asked, his voice already thick with sleep. "The story?" She smiled, a genuine, if exhausted, expression. "Okay. Once upon a time, there was a very brave knight named Sir Danny." She told him the story, her voice low and soft, painting a picture of a world with castles and dragons and fields full of sunshine, a world so far from this cold. One-room apartment. He was asleep before she'd even finished, the empty cup still held loosely in his hand. She gently pried it from his fingers. She stood for a long time, just watching him breathe. He was safe. He was here. That was all that mattered. She moved silently across the room. She knelt by the cracked window, where a draft snaked in, and lifted a loose floorboard. Underneath was a small, hollow space. In it sat a stack of envelopes, all marked with red ink, overdue. Final notice, disconnect, eviction. She stared at them, the weight of the world crushing her. The money from her last under-the-table cleaning job was gone. The deposit on this place had taken everything, and now there was nothing. A tear escaped, tracking a cold path down her cheek. She scrubbed it away, angry at her own weakness. "Mommy?" she started, her head snapping back to the mattress. Danny was watching her, his eyes open in the dim light from the street. "Are we okay?" he whispered. She felt the crack in her composure. He was 4 years old. He should be worried about monsters under the bed, not the ones on pink paper. Olivia crawled back to the mattress and lay down beside him, pulling the blanket over them both. She forced a smile, a bright, brittle thing that felt like it might shatter her face. "Of course we are, baby," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. "We're great. We're on a secret mission, remember? And we're winning." He snuggled against her, reassured. "Okay, good night, Mommy." "Good night, my love." She lay there, her body aching with cold and exhaustion, her stomach full and her heart empty. She listened to her son's breathing level out into the slow, steady rhythm of sleep, and only then did she let her own tears fall, silent and bitter, into the pillow, in his office. Matteo De Luca stared at the receipt. The restaurant below was empty. The city had gone to sleep. But he was wide awake. He'd had his men check the name Ellie against every database he had access to. Nothing. No credit, no license, no warrants. A ghost. But she wasn't a ghost. She was a woman who was starving, who was terrified, and who had spent $4.19 on milk she wasn't drinking. He thought of her eyes, hollow and haunted, and the way she'd clutched that flimsy green bag. He thought of the receipt, a single, stubborn fact that refused to align with the rest of the story. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know what she was running from. He only knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that she was hiding a child, and for reasons he couldn't name and didn't want to inspect too closely. He couldn't let it go. The image of her hollow eyes, superimposed over the line item for 1 gallon of milk, would not leave him. Matteo De Luca did not tolerate puzzles in his life. He lived by a code of cold, hard facts. Yet the ghost of the woman who called herself Ellie, and the small, crumpled receipt for a single gallon of milk had become the most profound puzzle of his adult life. It had been 24 hours, and the image of her hollowed-out eyes had not left him. The next morning, he stood in his office, the restaurant silent beneath him, and looked down at the Market Mart receipt, now sitting alone on his massive, polished mahogany desk. Alexei stood by the door, solid and silent as a granite pillar. "She lied," Matteo said, his voice a low rumble. He tapped the receipt. "She's starving, but she's not buying food. She's buying milk. She's not alone." "A child," Alexei stated. It wasn't a question. "A child," Matteo confirmed. "Find her. And find him." He looked up, his gaze sharp enough to cut glass. "I want this quiet. You use our people, not the street trash. You pull camera feeds from bodegas and laundromats. No police, no uniforms. No one knocks on a single door asking questions. I want this handled with subtlety. I don't want her spooked. She's already running from something. Find the woman with the kid." Alexei simply nodded and slipped out of the office, a shadow dissolving into other shadows. For the next 3 days, Matteo's underbosses and men moved like ghosts through the poorer districts of Northport, pulling threads, checking registers, and watching. Olivia Carter knew nothing of this. She only knew the relentless, grinding reality of her own desperation. The pasta from Luciano's, which had felt like a miracle, had also been a curse. It had woken up her starvation, and the hunger that followed was a physical, agonizing presence, a clawing beast inside her. She skipped 2 more meals, telling Danny they were playing a secret agent game where they had to eat small, quiet rations. She gave him the last of the bread, toasted on a dry pan, and the rest of the peanut butter, which she'd scraped from the jar with a spatula. Her only hope was the job, a late-night, under-the-table shift at the all-night laundromat, 8 blocks from her apartment. It paid $7 an hour in cash, given to her by the owner, Mr. Petrov. At the end of each shift, it was brutal, mind-numbing work. The air was thick with chemical steam and the hot, metallic smell of the dryers. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sickly, buzzing glare over everything. Tonight, she was on her second double shift in a row. It was almost 3 in the morning. She'd been awake for nearly 48 hours, between the shifts and caring for Danny. Her body was a leaden weight. Her eyelids were sandpaper. The droning of the machines was a lullaby, and the warm, damp air was a cocoon. She was just finishing mopping the floor, her movements sluggish and automatic, when she sat down on a plastic bench. Just for a second, she just needed to close her eyes for 1 second. She woke to the sound of a key in the office door. Sunlight was streaming through the dirty, plate glass window. It was 7 in the morning. No. Olivia scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding with a sick, panicked rhythm. The mop was still in the bucket. The floor was half done. Mr. Petrov, a stout man with weary eyes and a permanent frown, was standing by the cash register, his coat on. He just looked at her. "I'm sorry, Mr. Petrov, I'm just so tired. I'll finish right now. I'm so sorry." She grabbed the mop, her hands shaking. "Ellie," he said, and his voice wasn't angry, which was worse. It was just tiring. "This is the 3rd time. You fall asleep on the tables, you burn the sheets in the press, and now you sleep all night. Please, I need this job. I have—" She cut herself off. "Never mention the kid. I have rent. Please, it won't happen again." He shook his head, pulling 2 $20 bills and a 10 from his wallet. He held them out to her. "I cannot pay you to sleep. I'm sorry. Find somewhere else." "No!" The word was a desperate sob. "Please, I'll work for free for the rest of the week. Just don't fire me." "I am not a bad man," he said, sighing, "but I am not a charity. Take the money. Go." She stared at the $50. It was an insult. It was a lifeline. It was everything she had in the world. She snatched the bills from his hand, her face burning with humiliation, and ran. She didn't stop until she was back in her apartment, where Danny was still sleeping peacefully on the mattress, unaware of how close they were to the edge. She held the $50, the paper worn and soft. It would buy milk. It would buy bread. For maybe 4 days. Then what? The next day, she did the one thing she'd sworn she'd never do. She bundled Danny up, told him they were going on a long walk to a new park, and took the bus to the County Department of Family Services. The building smelled of stale coffee, antiseptic, and a deep, institutional hopelessness. She sat for 3 hours in a hard plastic chair, surrounded by other exhausted mothers and crying children, just to be seen. Finally, a woman with flat, gray hair called her name. Olivia sat at the window, a thick pane of glass separating them. "I need housing," Olivia whispered, her voice cracking. "I was not safe. We need a place in a shelter." The woman's gaze didn't soften. She typed, the clacking of her keyboard echoing in the quiet room. "Are you currently in a situation of domestic violence?" Olivia flinched. The question was a physical blow. "I ran away from my ex months ago. I'm from Ohio." "Do you have an active restraining order? A police report?" "No, I just left. I didn't have time." The woman sighed, a sound of bureaucratic impatience. "Without a report, I can't fast-track you for a DV bed, the regular shelter system. Well, the wait list is 3 to 4 months, especially for a mother with a male child over 2. Months? Olivia felt the floor drop out from beneath her. "But we have nowhere to go. I have no money. We're going to be on the street." The woman looked up, her eyes finally showing a flicker of something, not pity, but a tired, practiced empathy. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There's nothing I can do today. You can put your name on the list, but I would advise you to find a friend to stay with." "I don't have any friends," Olivia said, the words stark and terrible. She stumbled out of the office, leading Danny by the hand. He was looking up at her, his small face pinched with worry. "Is the park closed? Mommy?" Olivia couldn't speak. She hurried him into the women's restroom. It was filthy. She locked them both in the large, handicapped stall. She sat on the closed toilet lid, pulling Danny onto her lap, and buried her face in his small shoulder. And she broke. She wept. Not with the quiet, dignified tears of a movie, but with ugly, racking, silent sobs that shook her entire body. She stuffed her fist into her mouth to muffle the sound, tasting the salt of her own skin, the grime of the city. She cried for the job she'd lost, for the months-long wait list, for the $50 that was now only $42 after the bus fare. She cried because she was so tired, and there was no one in the world to help her. Danny just held her, his small arms wrapped tightly around her neck. "It's okay, Mommy," he whispered, his voice the only clean thing in the room. "It's okay. I love you." That night, Matteo DeLuca got the call. "Boss," Alexei said. "We found her. A tenement on 8th Street, apartment 3B. The name on the lease is a ghost. Paid cash deposit. The super says she's a single mother. Quiet. Never any trouble. How do you know it's her?" "Got her on a corner store camera. Buying milk," Matteo finished. "Apples," Alexei corrected. "And milk. She left the laundromat 3 blocks over this morning. It looked like she was fired." Matteo hung up. He sat in his car, a black, immaculate sedan that was invisible in its own quiet power, and stared at the address for a long time. Then he put the car in gear. He parked half a block away. The building was a wreck, a brick-faced slum with boarded-up windows on the first floor. He walked to the front, but he didn't go in. He circled the building, moving through the trash-filled alleyway, until he found a window that corresponded to apartment 3B. It was on the 3rd floor, but the fire escape gave him a vantage point. If he climbed to the 2nd floor landing, he did. His expensive leather shoes silent on the rusted metal. The window was cracked and covered in grime. He could barely see inside. The room was almost bare. A mattress on the floor, a small table, a tiny kitchenette. It was cold. He could see his breath, and he saw her. Olivia. Not Ellie. He knew, somehow, that Ellie was a lie. She was sitting on the mattress, her back to the window. A small, blonde-haired boy was curled in her lap, wrapped in a thin blanket, and she was singing. Her voice was as thin as the window glass, but clear. It was a simple, aching lullaby. "Hush, little baby. Don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." Matteo stood on the fire escape in the freezing New Jersey night, a man who had not felt a simple, unadulterated emotion in 15 years, and listened. He watched her run her hand over the boy's hair, her movements slow with exhaustion. He watched her look around the freezing, empty room, her shoulders slumped. He saw the moment she thought the boy was asleep, and her face crumpled, just for a second before she smoothed it out again. The milk receipt made a terrible, perfect sense. He did not knock. Knocking was an intrusion. Knocking was what the bad men did. Instead, he went back to his car. He drove to the all-night grocery store, not the Market Mart, but a good one. He filled a cart himself. Thick bread, real butter, a roasted chicken, still warm, soup in a carton, pasta, apples, oranges, 2 gallons of whole milk, and, on a whim, a soft, plush heating blanket. He drove back. He carried the bags, 4 of them, up the 3 flights of stairs. His steps silent, he left them all in front of her door. 3B. He placed the heating blanket on top. He took a card from his wallet, a simple, black card with Luciano's embossed in gold. He didn't write on it, he just tucked it into the bag, where she would find it. He almost left, but he paused. He went back to his car and found a notepad and a pen. He tore off a sheet and wrote 3 words, his handwriting a strong, dark slant, no strings, eat something. He tucked that note on top of the chicken and walked away. Olivia heard the soft thud. Her eyes snapped open. She hadn't been asleep, just drifting in a cold fog. Danny was asleep beside her, his breath a small, warm puff in the frigid air. Someone was at the door. Her heart leaped into her throat, choking her. He'd found her. Lucas. Oh, God. He'd found her. She slid off the mattress, her stockinged feet silent on the floorboards. She crept to the door, her hand over her mouth. She peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but at her feet, packages, bags. Her blood ran cold. This was his move, the surprise. He used to do this. He would buy her things, lavish her with gifts. Right before She backed away from the door, her entire body shaking. No. She had to run. She had to get Danny. She grabbed her son's coat, her hands fumbling, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She looked around the room. There was nothing to pack. She shook Danny awake. Baby, we have to go. We're going on an adventure. Right now. Put your coat on. It's dark, he mumbled, confused and sleepy. I know, baby, I know. That's the best time for adventures. She was pulling his arms through the sleeves when she stopped. Her eyes fell on the note, which she could see now, slipped under the door. She crawled over and pulled it through. No strings. Eat something. It wasn't his handwriting. Lucas's handwriting was a lazy, rounded scrawl. This was sharp, controlled, and strong. Her panic receded, just a fraction replaced by a profound confusion. She opened the door a crack. The bags were still there. One of them had a small, black card sticking out of the top. Luciano's, the man in the dark suit, the man with the quiet, assessing eyes, the man who had given her pasta. It wasn't Lucas. It was him. She opened the door and pulled the bags inside, her heart hammering. The smell of the roasted chicken filled the tiny, cold apartment, making her dizzy. She tore open the bag and saw the food, not junk, real, nourishing food, and the milk, and the blanket. She looked from the food to her son, who was watching her with wide, sleepy eyes. She looked back at the black card in her hand. She remembered his eyes. They hadn't been leering, like Mr. Petrov's. They hadn't been dead, like the woman's at the shelter. They hadn't been violent, like Lucas's. They had been concerned, calm. He had found her. The man from the restaurant had found her. And he hadn't sent the police. He hadn't sent social services. He had sent soup. The next day, she left Danny with the elderly woman downstairs, Mrs. Petrova, along with 2 of the new fresh apples and $10. She put on her cleanest, though still worn, sweater. She walked all the way to Luciano's. It was just after 2 in the afternoon. The restaurant was closed, but she could see staff moving inside. She pushed the heavy door. It was unlocked. A young woman was polishing glasses at the bar. She looked up and her eyes widened. "Can I help you? We're not open for service." "I need to see the man." "The owner," Olivia whispered, clutching the black card in her hand. "The boss isn't in," the woman started. "She is talking to me." Mateo's voice came from the stairs. Olivia turned. He was standing there, not in a suit this time, but in dark trousers and a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He looked just as imposing. He nodded toward his office. "Up." She walked past him, her legs shaking. The office was even more intimidating in the daylight: dark wood, leather-bound books, and the faint, lingering smell of expensive cigar smoke. He closed the door behind them, a heavy, final click. She flinched. She stood in the middle of the room, a small, trembling bird in a lion's den. He didn't sit. He just watched her, his face unreadable. "My name," she whispered, the words tearing out of her. "My name is Olivia, not Ellie." He nodded slowly. "Olivia." He said the name as if tasting it. "That's a start." The food," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't understand. How did you find me?" "That is not your concern." "What do you want?" she asked, the fear creeping back. "I don't have any money. I can't pay you back for that." "I did not ask you to—" He walked to his desk, but he didn't sit behind it. He leaned against the front, crossing his arms. He was a wall of muscle and quiet intent. "I know about the milk receipt, Olivia, and I know about the apartment, and I know about the laundromat." She recoiled, her face pale. "You're watching me? I am a man who does not like puzzles." He pointed a strong, thick finger at the spot on his desk where the receipt had been. You're a puzzle. You're starving, but you buy milk for someone else. You haven't eaten a real meal in days. You have a child, a boy." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Olivia's legs gave out. She didn't fall, but she stumbled back, grabbing the arm of a leather chair to steady herself. The secret she had guarded with her life, the one thing she had protected, he knew. A single tear, hot and heavy, escaped her and rolled down her cheek. She was too tired to even wipe it away. Mateo moved. He was fast and silent. In one step, he was in front of her. She flinched, her hands coming up in a defensive posture she knew was useless. He stopped. He didn't touch her. Not at first. He just looked at the tear track on her face. Then, very slowly, as if approaching a wild animal, he raised one hand. His fingers were warm, his skin slightly rough. He used the pad of his thumb to gently, almost reverently, brush the tear from her cheek. His touch was electric, but not sexual. It was grounding. It was the first gentle, human touch she'd felt in so long. It almost broke her. "You don't have to be scared here," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that vibrated through her. That was it. That was the thing that finally shattered the last of her control. The dam of pride, fear, and exhaustion that she had built, brick by painful brick, was obliterated by that one simple sentence. She broke down. It wasn't a small cry. It was a complete, shattering collapse. A sound of pure, undiluted grief and terror ripped from her throat, and her body folded in on itself. Mateo reacted on instinct. He caught her before she could hit the floor. He pulled her against his chest, one arm wrapping around her waist, the other coming up to cup the back of her head, pressing her face into the clean, warm fabric of his shirt. He just held her. Olivia sobbed. She clung to the front of his shirt, her fists gripping the material, and let it all out. She cried for her lost job, for her lost life, for the fear of Lucas, for the cold room and the hungry belly of her child. She cried because she was so utterly alone, and the man, this stranger, this quiet, dangerous man, just stood there, solid as an oak tree, and let her— He held her firmly, his embrace strong and encompassing, but careful. He held her like she was a priceless, broken thing that he was determined to hold together with his own 2 hands. He said nothing, just let his presence be a shield, absorbing the storm. When Olivia's storm of tears finally subsided, she was left empty. A hollowed-out shell, still clinging to the front of Mateo De Luca's shirt. He was solid and warm, smelling faintly of clean soap and expensive wool. She was acutely, horribly aware that she was snotty, damp, and trembling in the arms of a man she did not know, a man who moved with the silent, dangerous grace of a panther. She tried to pull away, her face burning with a humiliation so deep it was almost as painful as the grief. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice thick and ruined. "I shouldn't have—" Mateo did not release her. Not immediately. His hands remained firm on her back and at her waist. "Breathe," he commanded, his voice a low rumble against her ear. It wasn't a suggestion. She obeyed, taking a ragged, shuddering breath. "Again?" She did, and this time it was slightly more stable. Only then did he loosen his grip, allowing her to step back. He didn't let her retreat far. He kept one hand lightly on her elbow, guiding her to the leather chair she had grabbed earlier. She pushed, gently but firmly, until she sat. He vanished for a moment, and she heard the sound of water running in a private bathroom adjoining the office. He returned with a glass of water and a thick linen hand towel, impeccably white. He handed her both. "Drink," he said. She took the glass, her hands shaking so badly the water sloshed. He waited. "And wipe your face." She did, the cool linen a balm against her hot, blotchy skin. She felt like a child, exposed and ashamed. He took the glass and the towel from her, setting them aside. He didn't sit behind his fortress of a desk. He pulled up the other guest chair, sitting opposite her, their knees almost touching. "You have a son," he stated. "He's 4, maybe 5. You are running from his father. You are not from Northport. You have no family, no friends, and no money." Olivia just stared, her throat closing. He had stripped her life down to its bare, brutal facts. "Am I wrong?" She shook her head, a tiny, jerky movement. "Good." He leaned forward. "I told you I do not like puzzles. Now you are no longer a puzzle. You are a problem, and I solve problems." "I don't want to be a problem," she whispered. "It is too late for that," he said, not unkindly. "The question is, what happens next? You cannot go back to that apartment. It is a death trap. It is cold, and it is not secure. I don't have anywhere else. The shelter's wait list is months. You will not be going to a shelter." He stood, walking to his desk. He opened a drawer and took out a simple, white envelope. He tossed it onto her lap. It was thick. "What is this?" "Cash, $5,000. It will get you a new place, a deposit, food, clothes." She recoiled as if the envelope were on fire. "No." She pushed it off her lap and it fell to the floor. "No, I can't, I won't, I am not, I don't take money like that." Mateo looked at the envelope on the floor, then back at her. A flicker of something, not anger, but perhaps respect, moved in his eyes. "You have pride. It is a good quality. It is also, in your case, stupid. I won't be a—" She couldn't say the word. "A whore?" he finished for her, his voice flat. "Is that what you think this is? You think I buy women who faint on my doorstep?" He shook his head, a dark, almost amused sigh escaping him. "This is not a transaction. Olivia, this is a solution. But if your pride is that strong, we will do it your way." He paused, thinking. "Fine. You want to work. You will work. For me. Work. My bookkeeper is retiring. His daughter is having a baby. He wants to move to Florida. The office next to this one is empty. You will work there. You know numbers? I have a 2-year degree in accounting. From before." He nodded as if he'd expected it. "Of course you do. You will start tomorrow, 9 o'clock. You will organize my receipts, manage the restaurant payroll, and handle the vendor accounts. It is a simple job, but it is necessary. I will pay you a fair salary, and you will take an advance. That," he pointed to the envelope, "is your advance." She stared at the money. "I can't pay that back." "You will work it off. Now pick it up." She hesitated, then bent down, her fingers trembling, and picked up the envelope. It felt impossibly heavy. "Alexei will drive you home," he said, his tone final. "Go home. Feed your son. Get some sleep. Be here at 9. And Olivia." She paused at the door. "Do not lie to me again, ever. I do not tolerate liars in my inner circle. And you are, for now, in it." The next few weeks fell into a strange, new rhythm. The first few deliveries were anonymous, bags of groceries left at her door by Alexei, who would knock once and then be gone by the time she opened it. Then, tucked into a bag of fresh produce, she found a small card. Veal cutlets. He will need protein. It wasn't signed. The next one. With a box of pastries. You are still too thin. The notes were always short, always practical, never soft, and yet they were the kindest things anyone had ever done for her. She worked. She took Danny to Mrs. Petrova's apartment in the mornings, then walked the 12 blocks to Luciano's. Arriving at 8:45, she worked in the small, quiet office, surrounded by stacks of invoices and the scent of leather. She was good at it. She found discrepancies in the wine orders, streamlined the payroll, and balanced the books to the penny. She kept Danny a secret from the staff. He was her one vulnerability, the one thing she still held close. Matteo, she knew, had not told anyone. He respected that part of her privacy. Even as he systematically invaded the rest, he would appear in her office doorway, silent as smoke, and just watch her. He wouldn't speak, just stand there until she looked up. "You're frowning," he'd say. "The numbers are that bad? The produce supplier has overcharged you by 8% for 3 months, she'd reply, not missing a beat. "I flagged the invoices." A ghost of a smile would touch his lips. "Good, go home. It's 5. She was earning her keep. She was paying back the advance. Slowly, but he knew, and she knew, that the money was not the point. One evening, a cold, driving rain lashed the city. She was at her apartment and Danny had a cough, a raw barking sound that terrified her. The heating blanket was on, but the room was still damp. She was trying to get him to drink some watered-down juice when there was a knock. Not Alexei's thud, a different knock. Solid confidence. She froze. She looked through the peephole. Matteo, when he was standing in the hallway, soaked, his black overcoat dripping. He held a large paper bag. She fumbled with the chain, her heart hammering. "What's wrong? Is it the—" "The numbers are fine," he said, brushing past her into the small room, bringing the cold and the rain and the scent of the night with him. "He is coughing. I heard it from the hall." "He's just a cold," she said, her voice small. Matteo looked around the room. It was still sparse, but it was clean. Her small touches were everywhere. A colorful drawing Danny had made was taped to the wall. He looked at the mattress on the floor, where Danny was bundled in the heating blanket, his small face flushed, his eyes half closed. "He's asleep," she whispered. Matteo walked over to the mattress. He didn't loom. He crouched, his large frame folding, until he was on his knees beside the boy. He just watched him for a long, silent moment. Danny stirred, coughed, and burrowed deeper into the blanket. Olivia watched, her breath caught in her throat. This man, who she had seen make a grown waiter tremble with a single look, was kneeling on her dirty floor, his expression unreadable. He reached out, his hand large and scarred, and gently, so gently she almost couldn't believe it, he brushed a damp strand of blonde hair off Danny's forehead. Then he took the edge of the blanket and tucked it more securely around the boy's shoulders. When he stood, he turned to Olivia. His eyes, usually so dark and guarded, were raw. He looked exposed. He gestured to the bag he'd brought. "I brought soup from the restaurant. Tortellini on brodo. It is good for a cold." She took the bag, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you." He didn't leave. He just stood in the middle of her small room, a giant in a dollhouse. He looked at Danny, then at her, and a deep, weary sigh escaped him. "I know what it's like," he said, his voice so low she had to strain to hear it, to starve quietly. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He was staring at the drawing on the wall. "My mother." She was drunk. A beautiful, sad drunk. She left. "When I was 13, I just didn't come back from the bar one night. I was in that apartment for 3 days before anyone noticed. I ate the last of the bread and an old can of olives. You learn to be very, very quiet about hunger. You learn to just disappear." He finally looked at her. No child should ever have to learn that. Olivia's heart, which she had guarded for so long, simply broke. It wasn't a violent shatter, like the one in his office. It was a quiet, aching crack, making way for something new. She didn't know what to say. Thank you felt too small. I'm sorry felt insulting. So she just nodded. They stood in silence, the only sounds the rain on the glass and the soft, wheezing breath of her son. Sit down, Matteo, she said, her voice soft but clear. He looked surprised, but he did. There were no chairs. He just sat on the floor, his back against the peeling wall. Olivia sat near him, not touching, but close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. She portioned the soup into Danny's rocket ship cup, careful not to wake him. They sat like that for a long time. The tension that always hummed between them had changed. It was no longer just fear and authority. It was something else. A shared, heavy quiet. He's a good kid, Matteo said, watching the sleeping boy. He is, she whispered, her voice thick. Matteo turned his head, looking at her. His gaze was intense, tracing the line of her jaw, the shadows under her eyes, the soft, trembling curve of her mouth. He reached out, his hand hovering, and then his fingers, calloused and warm, found hers on the floor between them. He didn't grab her. He just laid his hand over hers. A jolt went through her, sharp and sweet. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. She looked at their hands, his, large, dark, and powerful. Hers, pale and thin, but no longer trembling. She hesitated, her entire past screaming at her to run, to pull away. Lucas's hands had been heavy and bruising, but this hand was just there, offering. Slowly, she turned her own hand over, lacing her fingers with his. His breath hitched, just slightly. He lifted their joined hands, his thumb rubbing a slow, gentle circle over her knuckles. He was still watching her, his eyes searching hers, asking a question she was too terrified to answer. She found herself leaning in. She didn't know why. It was an invisible pull, a magnetic force drawing her from the cold shadow of her past toward this new, dangerous warmth. She was leaning in, and he was meeting her halfway. His other hand came up, not to her body, but to her face. He cupped her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. "Olivia," he breathed, her name a prayer, and then his lips were on hers. It was not a kiss of passion, not at first. It was a kiss of profound, staggering relief. It was slow and deep and full of a silent, aching longing that matched her own. It was a promise. You are safe. You are seen. He tasted of the cold rain and a faint, expensive whiskey, and she realized she was starving for this, too. The kiss deepened. The gentle pressure became a firm, possessive claiming. His hand slid from her jaw to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair, tilting her head. This was the man, the boss, the predator. But he was careful. He pulled her, gently, until she was off the floor and in his lap, straddling his thighs, his overcoat still damp beneath her. She was surrounded by him. He was a fortress. Her hands, of their own accord, found his shoulders, gripping the thick wool of his shirt. Her breath was trembling, coming in short, sharp gasps against his mouth. He was holding her as if she were made of glass, but his grip was iron. He was kissing her like a man who had been underwater for a dismally long time and had just broken the surface for air. It was desperate and raw and utterly consuming, and it was too much. The hand on her waist, the possessive claim of his mouth, the feeling of being held down. Even gently it all came rushing back. The panic, sharp and cold, shot through her. "No," she gasped, pushing her hands flat against his chest. "Matteo, wait." He froze. Instantly. His body became rigid, but his hands loosened. He didn't push, didn't argue. He just stopped. He pulled back, his eyes dark, his breath ragged. He looked at her, searching her face, and whatever he saw there, the terror, the tears welling, made his expression soften. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm not ready for more." He didn't let her go. He just adjusted, shifting her on his lap so she was held against his chest, her head tucked under his chin. He rested his own forehead against her hair. He was breathing hard. "Okay," he whispered, his voice rough. "Okay, it's okay. It's all right." He just held her, his arms in a strong, safe cage, until her trembling stopped. He respected it. And in that moment, Olivia knew this man was nothing like the one she had run from. The next morning, the air was clear. The rain had washed the city clean, and for the first time in years, Olivia woke up smiling. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was real. She let Danny meet Mateo officially. When Mateo arrived with a fresh bag of pastries, Danny, no longer sick, was wide awake. He hid behind Olivia's legs, peering out. "Who's that?" he whispered. "This is Mateo," Olivia said. "He's a friend. He brought you the soup." Mateo crouched, just as he had the night before, bringing himself down to Danny's level. He didn't crowd him. "You like spaghetti?" Mateo asked. Danny's eyes went wide. He nodded. "I own a spaghetti restaurant," Mateo said, his voice softer than Olivia had ever heard it. Danny's face lit up. He stepped out from behind Olivia. "You're the spaghetti man?" Mateo's lips quivered in that rare smile. "I am. It's nice to meet you. Sir Danny?" Danny giggled. He instantly liked him. The peace lasted for 2 days. It was a beautiful, sunlit bubble. On the third day, Olivia was sweeping her floor, humming when she found it, slipped under the crack of her door. It was a piece of folded, dirty paper. It wasn't Mateo's thick, cream-colored stationery. Her blood turned to ice. She opened it. There was no note, just a single, dead, pressed flower, the same kind he used to leave on her pillow. She ran. She didn't grab a coat. She flew down the stairs, Danny in her arms, and ran all the way to Luciano's, bursting into the back office like a madwoman. Mateo was on the phone. He looked up, his eyes narrowing at her panic. He held up a hand to the caller. "I'll call you back." He hung up. "Olivia, what?" "He's here," she choked out, dropping the dead flower on his pristine desk. "He found me. Lucas. He's here." Mateo's entire demeanor changed. The warmth, the tenderness from 2 nights ago, vanished. It was sucked into a black hole, replaced by a cold, still darkness that was far more terrifying than any anger. He stood, his body tensing, his shoulders broad. He looked from the flower to her, and his face became a mask of cold, controlled fury. He picked up the dead flower, his expression becoming dark. "Nobody," he said, his voice a low, lethal promise, "touches what's mine." The dead flower lay on the dark, polished wood of his desk, a brittle, ugly stain. Olivia was trembling so hard she could barely stand, her arms locked around Danny, who had buried his face in her neck, sensing her terror. Mateo's stillness was the most frightening thing she had ever seen. He didn't rage. He didn't yell. His large frame seemed to draw in on itself, becoming denser, colder. He looked at the flower, then at her, and his eyes were black ice. "Alexei," he said, his voice a lethal, quiet command. He didn't even turn. His driver was just suddenly there, standing in the office doorway. "Take Mrs. Petrova's number from Olivia. Go to the apartment. Get everything. The boys' toys, their clothes, the papers under the floorboard, everything. Bring it here. Now." "Boss," Alexei glanced at Olivia. "Now." Alexei nodded, took a slip of paper from Olivia's shaking hand, and was gone. "Danny," Mateo said, his voice softening just a fraction. He crouched, his expensive suit jacket pulling tight across his shoulders. He was still holding the dead flower. "Hey, spaghetti man here. You know what I've got downstairs? A kitchen full of chocolate. You want to go with Sophia, my hostess? She can find some ice cream. We're going to be busy up here for a minute." Danny, sensing the authority but also the kindness, looked at his mother. Olivia nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "Go on, baby, I'm right here. I'll come get you in a minute." Sophia, who had been called with a silent gesture, gently led Danny out, her hand on his back. The moment the door clicked shut, the fragile calm shattered. "You're not going back there," Mateo stated. My things are being handled. You are not to set foot in that building again, ever. Do you understand me?" "Where will we go?" she whispered, the panic rising again. "Mateo, I can't just... I have a place, a condo in a high-rise, downtown. It has a doorman, 24-hour security, keycard elevators. He will never get within a mile of you." He was already on his phone, speaking low and rapidly in Italian. It was all ordered. He was moving her, changing her life, locking her down. A cold, sick feeling began to replace the fear. "I'm not going," she said. Matteo stopped. He lowered the phone. "What did you say?" "I'm not going." Her voice was shaking, but it was firm. "I'm not going to your condo. I'm not going to hide some secret you hide in a building." Matteo stared at her. He looked genuinely baffled. "This is not a discussion. This is about your safety. This is about him." He jabbed a finger toward the door where Danny had left. "I know. You don't think I know," she cried, the tears she'd held back finally spilling over. "But that's how it starts. Lucas started like that, too. It's for your own good. It's because I love you. It's to keep you safe. And then the walls move in, and the doors lock. And suddenly I can't see a friend. I can't have a key. I can't breathe. I will not be kept again, Matteo, not even by you." The muscle in his jaw clenched. "You think this is the same?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You compare me to him? You're making my decisions." She shot back, fueled by a terrifying, desperate courage. "You're moving me like a piece of furniture. You're not asking me. You're telling me, I just got a job. I just started to feel human. And now you want to lock me in a glass tower. I won't do it. I'll take Danny and I'll run. I'll run from you both." For the first time since she'd met him, Matteo De Luca was furious. He took a step toward her, his shadow covering her. He was a storm, dark and pulsing. "You want freedom?" he snarled, getting in her face. "Or do you want survival? You don't get both when monsters are chasing you. You want to be free? Go. Walk out that door. Go back to that apartment. He'll find you. He'll find you. And he'll find that boy. And what he'll do to you will be your freedom. You'll be free of me, and I'll be free of you. Is that what you want?" He was yelling now, a raw, ragged sound that echoed in the silent, expensive office. "Or," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, "you can swallow that stupid, stubborn pride for 5 minutes and let me keep you alive." Olivia was sobbing, her hands fisted at her sides. "That's not a choice. That's just a different cage." He stared at her, his chest heaving, the silence stretched, thick and toxic. He looked lost, frustrated. He scrubbed a hand over his face, a gesture of profound weariness. "Get out," he said, his voice flat. "What?" "Not you," he clarified, nodding toward the door. "Me. I need just—" He walked out of his own office, brushing past her, and slammed the door. She heard his heavy, angry footsteps going down the stairs. Olivia sank into the chair, her legs giving out, and put her head in her hands. She had won. She had defied him. And she had never felt more alone or more terrified. She was still sitting there an hour later when Alexei returned, silent as a ghost. He placed her worn duffel bag in a single, small cardboard box on the floor. He didn't speak. He just left her there. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't go back. She couldn't stay. It was almost 8 o'clock at night. The restaurant was full. The noise, a distant hum. Danny was asleep in her office, on a bed of folded tablecloths she'd gotten from a terrified-looking busboy. The office door opened. It was Matteo. He looked changed. His jacket was gone. His tie was loosened. He looked tired, and all the anger had drained out of him, leaving something softer and more hesitant. He didn't speak. He just walked to a cabinet and pulled out a large, rolled-up tube of paper. He walked to his desk and spread it out, weighting the corners with a heavy crystal ashtray and a letter opener. They were blueprints. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice rough from crying. "It's a property," he said, his voice quiet. He didn't look at her. He just stared at the paper. "It's mine. My grandfather left it to me. It's in Montclair, about 30 minutes from here." She walked over, her curiosity pulling her. It was a house, a small, 2-story house. She saw the labels: kitchen, living room, bedroom. "It's a fixer-upper," he said, a note of self-deprecation in his voice. "The plumbing is shot. The roof needs work. I bought it from the family estate 5 years ago. I was gonna, a project." He pointed with a thick, scarred finger. "This is the master bedroom, and this is the second bedroom. It faces east. Get the morning light. Good for a kid." He traced a small square. "And here, that's the backyard. It's big. There's an old oak tree. Good for a tire swing." He finally looked at her. His eyes were unguarded. The dark ice melted, leaving behind a vulnerability that shook her to her core. It's not a high-rise. Olivia, it doesn't have a doorman, it's just a house. On a quiet street. It's near a school. It has a garden. He took a breath. It's not for a mistress, it's for a family. He held her gaze. If you want it. Olivia's hand came up to her mouth. The blueprints blurred as her eyes filled with tears again. But these were different. They were not tears of fear or anger. They were tears of release. He wasn't offering her a cage. He was offering her a home, a garden, a tire swing. Matteo, she breathed. The word. A whisper. It's not safe. Not yet, he said quickly, as if afraid she'd misunderstand. We'd have to. I'd have to put men on it. Fix the security. New locks, new windows. But it could be hours. Hours. She broke down. But this time, it was a silent, streaming wave. She leaned forward, her hands pressing flat on the blueprints, on the drawing of the little house. I've never, she whispered, her voice choking. I've never had anyone want me for more than a night, or a favor. No one has ever offered me a garden. His hand covered hers on the desk. His skin was warm, his touch possessive, but this time, it felt right. It felt like an anchor. Olivia. She looked up. He was right there, his other hand coming up to cup her face, his thumb stroking her tear-stained cheek. He held her like that for a long, silent moment, just holding her. They were surrounded by the architecture of a life she'd never dreamed she could have. He pulled her gently, and she didn't resist. She met him, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, and she held him, her face buried in his chest. She held him tightly, breathing in his scent, anchoring herself to this impossible, solid man. It's yours, he whispered into her hair. It's all yours, him, and this. He kissed her, not like the last time, not with that searching, hesitant longing. This was a kiss of decision. It was deep and sure, and it tasted of an apology and a promise. It was the kiss of a man who had made up his mind. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with a new, different kind of fire. You'll stay here, in my apartment, above the restaurant, just for tonight. It's the safest place in the city. No one gets in here. And tomorrow, we start. He left her in her office and returned with a key. He led her and a sleepy, bundled Danny up a private, hidden staircase to a sprawling, immaculate apartment above Luciano's. It was all dark leather, polished wood, and glass. It was his. He made sure Danny was asleep in a spare room, tucked into a bed that smelled impossibly of clean, fresh linens. When he came out, Olivia was standing by the massive window, looking down at the city lights. She was a small, fragile silhouette in his oversized, masculine world. He walked up behind her, so close she could feel the heat of his body. He didn't touch her. Are you scared of me? Olivia, he asked, his voice low. She turned. She looked at his face, at the hard lines of his jaw, the deep, dark eyes. She saw the protector. She saw the danger. She saw the man who had offered her a garden. No, she whispered, not anymore. That was all he needed. He kissed her, and this time, it was a claim. His mouth was firm, his hands sliding around her waist, pulling her flush against him. She met him, her fear gone, replaced by a desperate, aching need. She kissed him back with all the pain and all the hope and all the years of being untouched and unloved. He broke the kiss only to lift her. She was weightless in his arms. He carried her into his bedroom, a room of shadows and moonlight, and laid her on the bed. He didn't rush. He moved with a slow, reverent purpose. He sat beside her, his hand coming up to trace the line of her collarbone. You are beautiful, he breathed, as if the admission was painful. He undressed her slowly. Each piece of her old, worn clothing was removed like a piece of armor, reverently, his eyes never leaving hers. He was watching her, gauging her, making sure the fear didn't return. His fingers, calloused and rough from a life she couldn't imagine, were impossibly gentle. They trembled, just slightly. When she was bare, in his bed, he just looked at her, his chest rising and falling. He stripped off his own shirt, and she saw him for the first time. Scars, old, pale lines, a map of a hard life. He came to her, his skin hot against hers. This wasn't the frantic, bruising desperation of her past. This was a slow, deliberate exploration. It was trust, given and received. It was warmth, sinking into her bones. It was a release of all the tension, all the fear, all the running. His hands were everywhere, stroking, soothing, claiming. His mouth was on her, at her throat, her shoulder, her lips. He was rediscovering her, and him, and them. It was emotional and tender, and when he finally made them one, she cried out, not in pain, but in a profound, shattering relief. It was a homecoming. Mateo slipped out of the bed before sunrise. The gray, pre-dawn light was just beginning to touch the city. Olivia stirred, and he paused, his hand on her hair. He kissed her temple, then got dressed in the dark. He had a meeting, an informant. He had to know what Lucas wanted. He learned. It was worse than he expected. Lucas wasn't just a violent ex. He'd been bragging in the low-life bars, telling people he was owed, that his property had been stolen, and that she'd run out on a massive debt. He was trying to sell her, or sell information about her. That night, Olivia was in Mateo's apartment. Danny was having a nightmare, tossing and turning in the big, strange bed. "No, go away," he cried out in his sleep. "Shh, baby, shh." Olivia comforted him, her hand on his back. "Mommy's here. You're safe. You're safe." She calmed him, but she couldn't calm herself. She stared out the window, a terrible, cold premonition snaking up her spine. Something wasn't right. Mateo was late. He said he'd be back by 10. It was almost 2 in the morning. Just as the panic began to fully take her, she heard the key in the private door. Mateo walked in. He was a creature of the night, his overcoat still on, his face a mask of shadows. He stopped when he saw her. He didn't say anything, but she saw it. There was a dark, drying stain on the knuckles of his right hand, blood. And when he shrugged off his coat, she saw the dull black outline of a gun holstered against his ribs. Her hand flew to her mouth. Mateo. He looked at his own hand, as if just noticing the blood. He looked at her, his eyes flat and cold. "I found Lucas," he said, his voice void of all emotion. "We need to talk." The apartment was silent, save for the hum of the city lights far below. Olivia stood frozen, her hand at her throat, her eyes fixed on the dark, drying blood on Mateo's knuckles. He looked at his hand, then at her, and the coldness in his eyes was a physical thing, a barrier of ice. "He's working with a local crew," Mateo said, his voice flat, devoid of the warmth and passion from the night before. This was not the lover. This was the boss. He walked past her to the bar, unholstering the gun and setting it on the polished stone with a heavy, final thud. A small-time gang, scum. He was offering to sell information. On you. "Sell me?" The words were a dry whisper. "Information," he corrected, his back to her as he poured a measure of whiskey. "Where you were, that you had a kid, that you were unprotected." He was trying to find a buyer, someone who'd pay for access, or maybe just for the pleasure of hurting you. He was also talking about a debt, a big one. "There is no debt," she said, her voice shaking. "I took $200 when I ran." That was it. Everything else, he just wanted to own me. Mateo drank the whiskey in one short, sharp motion. He set the glass down. He was in a bar on the east side. He's not there anymore. He flexed his bloody hand. "I roughed him up. Broke a few things. Nothing permanent. He's smart enough to know it was a warning. But he's stupid enough he might not heed it. I didn't kill him." He finally turned to her, his face a mask. Yet, the dam of her newfound safety, the fragile, beautiful bubble of the previous night, burst. The terror came back, cold and total. She saw the dead flower, she saw the blood, she saw the gun on his counter. "We have to go," she said, her voice frantic. She backed away, her eyes darting to the spare room where Danny slept. "We have to run. Now. He'll come here. He'll find us. He'll Mateo. He'll bring friends. He'll—" No. The word was a stone wall. "What? He knows you now. He saw you. He'll know I'm with you. He'll come for... He won't get in here." "You don't know him," she shrieked, her control shattering. "You don't know what he's like. He's a monster. He won't stop. He'll keep coming. We have to run. I can't put Danny through this. I can't let him go." She was already moving toward the bedroom. He was in front of her in a single, silent stride, his hands on her shoulders, his grip like iron. He didn't shake her, but he held her, forcing her to be still. "Listen to me," he growled, his face inches from hers. "You want to run? You want to take that boy and go where? Another city? Another rotted-out apartment? How long until he finds you again? How long until the next Lucas finds you? You're a rabbit, Olivia. You've been a rabbit your whole life, and you will be prey until you stop running." I don't know how," she sobbed, her hands pushing uselessly against his chest. His grip softened, but his eyes were just as intense. "You want to keep running forever? Or do you want to stand here, with me, and bury this for good?" She stared at him, the question hanging in the air. Running was all she knew. It was her only defense. To stay felt like suicide. But to run, he was right. It would never end. She would be running for the rest of her life, looking over her shoulder, waiting for the dead flower. She looked at his strong, bloody hand, the hand that had hurt a man for her. Then she looked at his other hand, the one that had held her with such impossible tenderness, the one that had shown her blueprints of a garden. Her sobs quieted. Her breathing steadied. She fisted her hands in his shirt. "How?" she whispered, the word raw. "How do we bury him?" A new, cold light entered his eyes, a predator's satisfaction. "Not like him," he said. "Not by running and hiding. We do it my way. In the light. We make you so solid, he can't touch you. We make you a fortress." The next morning, Olivia Carter, flanked by Matteo DeLuca and a man in a $9,000 suit who introduced himself as Mr. Cohen, walked into the Northport police precinct. She was terrified. But as she sat in the cold, sterile room, Matteo's hand on her back, his presence a silent, heavy weight, she found her voice. She told them everything. The years of abuse, the threats, the escape, and, taking a cue from Mr. Cohen, she told them about the debt. "It was his," she said, her voice clear. "A gambling debt. He lost thousands. He tried to sell me to one of his bookies. That's when I ran. I think he's in Northport because the bookies are here, and he's trying to trade me to clear his debt." She didn't know if it was true, but Mr. Cohen had nodded, and Matteo's face had remained impassive. It was a story, a version of the truth that these men, in this world, would understand. And then, she produced the one thing she had run with, the one thing she had hidden under the floorboards with the overdue notices, a USB drive. "What is this?" the detective asked. "Medical records," Olivia said, her voice shaking but hard. "From 2 years ago, a broken wrist, 4 cracked ribs, a fall down the stairs, and photos. He used to like to take photos. After, I took his phone and emailed them to a secret account. They're all there." The detective looked at Matteo, who simply stared back. "Mister," Cohen slid a card across the table. "My client is filing for an emergency order of protection. We will be pressing charges for assault, battery, stalking, and interstate harassment. We expect the warrant to be issued within the hour." When they walked out, the sun was bright. Olivia felt lighter, as if she'd just put down a suitcase she'd been carrying for a decade. "He'll be arrested," she said. "He will," Matteo said, guiding her into the back of his sedan. "He'll go to jail." "For a time," Matteo said. "But that's not the point. The point is, you're not a ghost anymore. You're on paper, you have a file, you have a record, you exist, and he's a criminal. You," he tapped her chin, "are a victim. In the eyes of the law, it's a start." Life changed. Matteo moved her and Danny into the Montclair house. Even though it was still a construction site, "It's safer," he'd said. "The security is my own." He had 2 of his men, quiet and polite, sitting in a black car at the end of the quiet, tree-lined street, 24/7. The first few nights, they slept on mattresses on the floor. the smell of drywall compound and fresh paint in the air. Mateo slept on the couch in the empty living room, his gun on the floor next to him. He was a sentinel, a dark guardian, and she felt, for the first time in her life, completely safe. A few days later, one of his men intercepted a man in a hoodie, taking pictures of the house. He was, it turned out, one of the local gang members Lucas had been seen with. Mateo became a shadow. He rode with her everywhere. He personally drove her to drop Danny at his new, expensive daycare, a place with bright walls and kind-faced teachers. He sat in on her interviews for culinary school, his silent presence making the admissions deans sweat. She got in, and Olivia began to blossom. With the warrants out for Lucas, the immediate threat was gone. He had vanished, gone to ground, and in his absence, the light came back to her eyes. Mateo gave her a credit card. For the house, he'd said, and she used it. She bought new clothes, not for him but for her, a pair of sharp, dark jeans, soft sweaters that weren't 3 sizes too big, a pair of leather boots. She cut her hair, trimming away the lank, dead ends, and a bright, healthy wave emerged. She enrolled in her first pastry class. She was a natural. Her hands, which had only ever trembled, were steady. She learned the structure of a croissant, the chemistry of a Genoese sponge. She came home, her cheeks flushed, her hair dusted with flour, and for the first time, she smelled like vanilla and butter. Not fear. Danny, too, was a different child. He was gaining weight. He was loud. He was happy. He adored Mateo, following him around the construction site, handing him screws, helping him. One night, Mateo came home to find the kitchen finished. Olivia had been working on a surprise. The counters were installed, the new stove was hooked up, and she was standing there, in a new, bright yellow dress, holding a glass of wine. A real, home-cooked meal was on the table. "A date," she said, her smile shy but brilliant. "We're going on a date. Here." He looked at her, and his throat was thick. The woman who had fainted at his door was gone. In her place was this radiant, strong, beautiful stranger. After dinner, after Danny was asleep, they were sitting on the new, comfortable couch. He'd put on some old jazz record. "You look beautiful, Olivia," he said, his voice rough. "I feel beautiful," she said. And she meant it. He stood, holding out his hand. "Dance with me." "Here?" She laughed. "Here." He pulled her close in the middle of the half-finished living room, and they danced. No shadows, no fear, just the music and the smell of paint and the warm, quiet night. His hands were strong and sure on her back. Her head was tucked under his chin. It was more intimate than any night of passion, but the world outside was not so kind. Mateo's world, the one of dark suits and darker loyalties, had noticed. A charity case. One of his capos, a man named Vieri, had sneered at a business dinner. "You're getting soft." Boss. A stray dog and her pup. "They make you weak." Mateo hadn't raised his voice. He had simply stopped eating. He'd set his fork down, very slowly. He'd looked at Vieri, and the room had gone dead silent. "What's mine," Mateo had said, his voice a cold, quiet blade, "is not weak. And if you or anyone else ever refers to the mother of my family in that way again, I will personally cut your tongue out of your head. Are we clear?" Vieri, a man who had been killed, had turned pale. "Clear." "Boss, my apologies." Mateo had to show her. He had to make her understand what she was to him. He took her and Danny to a quiet gated place on a hill overlooking the ocean. It was not a public cemetery. It was a private, immaculate garden, filled with old stones. The DeLuca name was carved everywhere. "Where are we?" "Mateo," she asked, holding his hand. He walked them to a simple, unadorned headstone, half hidden by a weeping willow. "Angelina DeLuca, my mother." He stared at the stone. "She died when I was 20, drank herself into the grave. By then, I hadn't spoken to her in 5 years. I hated her. I hated her for leaving. I hated her for being weak." He crouched, his fingers brushing the cold stone. "I carried that hate for so long. Olivia, it's what made me. It's what kept me safe. Trust no one, never let emotion interfere. Protect the family. But the rules were all based on this pain, this hole she left. He stood and turned to her. He reached out and touched Danny's hair, then her cheek. But then I found you, who were starving, but who fed your son. You, who were terrified, but who was strong. You were everything she wasn't. You were everything I never knew I was looking for. His eyes were shining, a raw, unbelievable vulnerability in them. I look at the stone now, and I don't feel the hate. I feel pity. She's just a sad story. She's not my story anymore. He took her hands, pulling her close. This is where my pain ends, with you. Olivia's heart was too big for her chest. She looked at this powerful, dangerous, beautiful, broken man who had given her a garden, who had given her a voice, who had given her a life. I love you, she whispered. The words were simple and true, and they were the most terrifying and most wonderful thing she had ever said. Mateo, I love you. He closed his eyes, his whole body tensing, as if her words were a physical blow. He pulled her to him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was desperate and hungry, and full of a love that was as deep and as dark as the ocean below. You're mine, Olivia, he murmured against her lips, his voice thick. Body and soul, you're mine. That night, 500 miles away, in a dingy motel room in Indiana, a phone rang, a man with Olivia's eyes, but none of her light, picked it up. What? The man, Olivia's brother, snarled. It was Lucas's voice, frantic and low. I found her. She's with him. A big shot. A mob boss. He's got her locked down in some house he's fixing up. He's moving them in. You said you wanted in. You said she ruined your life when she ran. Well, here's your chance. There was silence. He's a mob boss. You idiot. He'll kill us. Not if we get the kid, Lucas whispered, his voice slick. Not if we get the kid. He's soft on them. I know the house. I know the street. He's got men. But he's not expecting us. He's not expecting family. The new house in Montclair was starting to smell like home. It was no longer the scent of fresh paint and drywall dust, but of baking bread, cinnamon, and the faint, clean aroma of lemon-scented polish. Olivia stood in the new kitchen, the late afternoon sun streaming through the window that overlooked the garden, and for the first time in her adult life, she was breathing, all the way down to her toes. Danny was at his new preschool, a bright, happy place where he was learning to paint and share, and not, as he had for so long, to be quiet. Mateo was at Luciano's, locked in a deep, unavoidable meeting with his suppliers. This was their new, beautiful, domestic quiet. It was 3:15 in the afternoon. She was grabbing her keys to go pick up Danny. Her phone, resting on the new marble countertop, buzzed. Unknown number. Her heart, which had just been beating so calmly, gave a sick, painful lurch. She stared at it, her hand frozen. It could be anyone. A contractor, the school. It buzzed again. She answered, her throat suddenly dry. Hello? Silence. Just the sound of breathing and a faint, tinny echo, like an open warehouse. Hello? She repeated, her voice sharper. You got comfortable. Liv, the voice whispered. It was him. Lucas. A cold, oily sound that she thought she had buried. You got a new house. A new man. You forgot about me. How did you get this number? She said, her body gone cold, her back pressing against the counter. You think your spaghetti man is the only one who can find things? He gave a low, wet chuckle. I've been watching you. Watching him. He's a cute kid. Blonde hair. Likes the blue swings. He's going to be sad you're late to pick him up. Olivia's blood turned to ice. She looked at the clock. 3:17. Pickup was 3:30. Danny? She breathed. Oh, he's fine. For now. The smile was in his voice. But he won't be. If you're not where I tell you to be, you're not going to call your new boyfriend, you're not going to bring his army, you're going to come alone, or the next time you see your kid, he won't be talking. No, please, Lucas, don't. The old construction site, off Route 3, you know the one, where they were building those ugly condos before the money ran out. You have 30 minutes. Come alone, or he dies. The line clicked dead. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. The new Olivia, the one who danced in living rooms and baked bread, vanished. The rabbit, the survivor, the terrified mother took her place. He said, alone. If she called Mateo, he would bring his men. He would bring guns. And Lucas, cornered and vicious, would he? Would. She couldn't. She couldn't risk it. This wasn't Mateo's world. This was her monster, her past, her fight. She grabbed her keys. She didn't leave a note. She just ran. Mateo looked at his watch. 4:15. The meeting had run long. He'd told Olivia he'd meet them at the house by 4. He pulled out his phone, a rare smile touching his lips, ready to tell her he was on his way. He had 2 missed calls from the daycare. His smile vanished. He dialed the number, his thumb moving with a sudden, urgent speed. Mr. DeLuca! It was the director, her voice tight with panic. Thank God, Olivia never showed up, and Danny, a man, came. He said he was Olivia's brother. He had a copy of Danny's birth certificate. He knew his allergies. She listed him as an emergency contact, but he seemed wrong. We tried to call Olivia, but she didn't answer. Mateo's vision went red. He was on his feet, his chair crashing back against the wall of his office. Where is my son? He roared, his voice a primal sound that shook the foundations of the restaurant. He took him. He left with him 20 minutes ago. We called the police. Mr. DeLuca. Mateo hung up. He didn't need the police. He slammed his hand on his desk intercom. Alexi, get the car. Now, get everyone. Code black. She's gone. They have a boy. He was out of the office in 2 seconds, his mind a cold, sharp, calculating machine. Where? Where would she go? He pulled his phone. His men already scrambling, doors opening, the restaurant's quiet evening shattered. He barked at an underling. Track her phone. Track the car. Find her. Find them. Now. He saw the open text on his phone. From Olivia. From an hour ago, a picture of a cake she was testing. Coming home? He looked at the daycare's number. Emergency contact. Brother, and he knew. The brother. The one she'd mentioned. The one who sold her out. He wasn't tracking Olivia. He was tracking Lucas. The old Route 3 construction site, he snarled to Alexi as he vaulted into the back of the sedan. He's there. He's been there for a week. My informant told me. I thought he was hiding. He was planning. He was furious. He was terrified. He was a man with an empire, and in that moment he was utterly powerless. He had let his guard down. He had let her be normal, and the price for that normal, quiet afternoon was his son. Go, he ordered Alexi, and pray we are not too late. The construction site was a skeleton of concrete and rusted rebar, a monument to a failed dream. The wind howled through the empty floors. Olivia's small car skidded to a halt in the gravel. She ran into the dark, cavernous structure. Danny, she screamed, her voice echoing. Lucas, I'm here. I'm alone. Well, look at her. The voice came from the shadows. Lucas stepped out. He was thinner than she remembered, his face pocked, his eyes burning with a manic, jealous energy. The queen of the castle. You clean up well. Live. Where is he? She spat, her fear replaced by a cold, maternal rage. Oh, he's here. From behind a concrete pillar, another man emerged. He was slighter than Lucas, with her eyes, her pale skin. It was her brother, David, and he was holding a terrified, silent Danny in his arms. No, Olivia whispered, the betrayal a physical blow. David, how could you? How could I? David sneered, his face a mask of petty resentment. He paid me. Liv, he paid me what you cost me. You ran off. You left me to deal with your mess, with his debts. This is just balancing the books. Mommy, Danny cried, struggling against David's grip. It's okay, baby, it's okay, Olivia said, her hands held up, her eyes locked on Lucas. Let him go. Please. You want me. You're mad at me. Fine. Take me. Let my son go. She took a step forward, offering herself. Lucas laughed. Take you. You think that's what this is? You think you're still worth something? He grabbed her hair, yanking her close, his other hand holding a small, sharp knife. You think a mob boss will come for you? You think you're special? He pressed the knife to her throat. He's not coming for you. Liv, he's already forgotten you. You're a stray, a charity case. And now, you're going to pay for everything. You touched my family. The voice was not a yell. It was a low, cold promise from the grave. It echoed from all around them. Lucas froze. David whimpered, looking around, his grip on Danny tightening. "Who's that?" Lucas hissed. A dozen shadows detached themselves from the darkness. Men in dark suits, their movements silent, professional. They formed a circle, and then, from the center, Mateo stepped into the dim light. He was in his shirt sleeves, his jacket gone, his face a mask of such cold, pristine rage that Olivia's breath caught. His gun was not drawn, not yet. "You touched my family," he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "Now you bleed." Lucas, in his panic, made his final mistake. He shoved Olivia toward Mateo and made a dash for Danny, pulling the boy from David's arms, holding the knife to his throat. Stay back, or he dies. I'll kill him, I swear to God." Mateo stopped. The world stopped. "Boss," Alexei said, his gun level. "The shot, it's not clean." "No," Mateo said, his eyes locked on Lucas, on the knife, on his son. He held his hands up, open. You're Lucas. You're the man. You won." "What?" Lucas spat, his eyes wide, his hand shaking. "You won," Mateo said, taking one slow, measured step. "You wanted her. She's yours. Let the boy go. He's nothing. He's just a kid. You can have her. Just let him walk over to me." Lucas was confused, his desperate plan crumbling. Olivia was watching. She saw Mateo's eyes. They were not on Lucas. They were on Danny. "Danny," Mateo said, his voice calm. "This is a game. A scary game. But you're brave, right? Like Sir Danny." Danny, terrified, just nodded, his eyes wide. "When I say now, I want you to bite his arm, as hard as you can. Can you do that for me?" Lucas's head snapped. "What did you say?" "Now," Mateo roared. Danny bit down. Lucas screamed, a high-pitched, furious sound, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all Mateo needed. He didn't run. He lunged. He moved with the speed of a striking cobra. Covering the 10 feet in an instant, he wasn't a man anymore. He was a force of pure, primal protection. He slammed into Lucas, his arm clamping down on the knife hand, twisting it with a sickening snap. The knife clattered to the concrete. Olivia ran, snatching Danny, pulling him into her arms, covering his head, running for the shadows. "David, get him!" Lucas screamed. But David was on his knees, his hands on his head, one of Alexei's men holding a gun to his temple. It was just Mateo and Lucas, and it was not a fight. It was an execution. Mateo hit him, a closed fist strike to the jaw that sent Lucas reeling. He hit him again, and again. It was raw, visceral, the sound of knuckles on bone echoing in the concrete space. Mateo didn't stop. He was fueled by every second of terror, every missed call, every image of that knife at his son's throat. He threw Lucas into a stack of rebar, the metal poles clattering. Lucas tried to scramble, but Mateo was on him. His large hands finding Lucas's throat, he lifted him, slamming him against a concrete pillar. "You touched my son!" Mateo snarled, his voice a guttural roar. His hands tightening, Lucas's face was turning purple. He was choking, his feet kicking uselessly. Mateo was going to kill him. He was going to crush his throat, right here, and he was not going to stop. "Mateo!" He heard her, but the sound was distant, muffled by the blood roaring in his ears. "Mateo, stop, please!" He squeezed harder. "Danny needs to see a man who walks away." The words, a desperate, sobbing shriek, cut through the red haze. "Danny." Mateo froze. His hands were still locked, but his vision cleared. He looked over. Olivia was standing 20 feet away, her body shielding Danny, but the boy was watching. His small face pale, his eyes wide, taking in everything. He was watching his father, his protector, become a monster. Matfreo looked at the pathetic, gasping creature in his grip. He looked at his son. With a final, guttural roar of disgust, he released him. Lucas crumpled to the ground, unconscious, gasping, but alive. Mateo stood, his chest heaving, his hands shaking. He was covered in sweat, his knuckles raw and bleeding. Sirens wailed in the distance. He looked at Alexei. Alexei nodded. "The lawyer is at the precinct, boss. The police received an anonymous tip about a kidnapping in progress." Matteo walked away from the man on the ground. He walked, step by painful step, past his men, until he was in front of Olivia. He fell to his knees. He didn't care about his suit or the gravel. He just knelt, his head bowed, his body trembling with the receding adrenaline. "Izzy," he whispered, his voice broken, unable to look. "He's okay," Olivia whispered. "He's fine." She knelt, too, pulling Danny with her. Danny, seeing this giant, terrifying man on his knees, reached out a small, hesitant hand and touched Matteo's bloody knuckles. "You saved me, Spaghetti Man," he whispered. Matteo broke. He pulled them both into his arms, crushing them to his chest, his face buried in Olivia's hair. He held his family, and he shook. Weeks later, the house was a home. Lucas and David were gone, buried so deep in the legal system by Matteo's lawyers that they would not see daylight for decades. The restraining order, the medical records, and the testimony of 10 of Matteo's men who happened to be at the site had sealed their fate. Olivia was in the kitchen at Luciano's, not as a bookkeeper. She had presented Matteo with a new dessert menu. He had tasted her cannoli, her tiramisu, her almond torta, and had fired his pastry chef on the spot. "She's too good," he'd told his head chef. "She's my boss in the kitchen." She was packing a box of fresh bread for them to take home, the restaurant humming behind her. Matteo walked into the kitchen, a sight that still made the staff nervous. He was carrying a long, official envelope. He didn't say anything, he just handed it to her. She wiped the flour from her hands and opened it. It was a court document. It was an adoption decree. It was finalized. "Matteo," she breathed, her eyes filling with tears. He's Daniel DeLuca," Matteo said, his voice thick. "He's my son." She threw her arms around him, right there in the middle of the kitchen, and kissed him, not caring about the applause that rippled through the staff. That night, they were in bed. The house was quiet, the moon bright in the garden. They were tangled together, her head on his chest, his arm a heavy, safe weight around her. This was their peace. The door creaked open. A small, 4-year-old body, clad in rocket ship pajamas, padded across the floor and scrambled up into the bed between them. "I had a dream," Danny whispered. "A bad one?" Olivia asked, pulling him close. "No," Danny said, his voice sleepy. "A good one." He fumbled on the nightstand and pulled out a piece of paper and a crayon. He'd been drawing, he held it up. It was a drawing of 3 figures, one big, one medium, one small. They were all holding hands. Underneath, a bright yellow circle, the sun. Matteo looked at the drawing. He looked at the boy, already drifting back to sleep, his small head burrowed into his new pillow. He looked at the woman, his woman, who was watching him, her eyes full of a love he'd never known existed. He reached over and pulled them both closer, Danny tucked between them, a safe, warm, and loved little boy. He kissed Olivia's temple, his lips brushing her soft hair. "This," he whispered, his voice rough with an emotion so profound it was almost painful. "This is what I was fighting for." She held Danny. He held her. And they were, all 3 of them, finally loved. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly hope it brought you on a journey. We love hearing from you. It's the best part of telling these stories. So please, comment and let us know where in the world you're listening from. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories so you never miss a new chapter. And finally, share your thoughts in English. What was your favorite part of Matteo and Olivia's story? We read every one.